I'm Garrett, I'm 19 years old, and just recently I took on my first long-distance sailing passage from Hawaii to French Polynesia. After 30 days of less than 3 hours of sleep per night, I was very ready to make landfall in Tahiti.
I made it! Lando!
In this video, I'm going to be making a tour of my 45-year-old North Sea 27 named Hooligan. With very little sailing knowledge, absolutely zero mechanical knowledge, $19,000 I saved up by myself in high school in a dream to sail around the world, I bought Hooligan in January of 2022. Hooligan is 27 feet long, 8 feet wide, weighs 8,000 pounds, and draws 3 feet and 6 inches. I did almost all the work on Hooligan by myself, learning as I went, and of course getting lots of knowledge and advice from my peers. To start off this boat tour, I'm just going to be doing a little walkthrough of the interior. Inside this door is my bathroom. In the boat world, you'd call it a head. Got my toilet, which works, but most of the time I just skip the middleman and go off the side when I'm sailing. I kept the majority of my food on the way down to French Polynesia under this cushion here. For the most part, ate protein powder, freeze-dried meals, prepackaged Indian food, dried fruit, nuts, and that sort of thing. In reality, I'm not much of a cook, but I still need a kitchen. Here it is. When I was sailing, this was my primary cooking device. It's a jet boil that I put on a gimbal. It basically only does soup and boils water, but on the passage that's all I needed. This little canister is super efficient. I only went through one in the whole trip, and this is on my second one now. But overall, I was pretty happy with this. Here's my refrigerator. It's made by Engel. Doesn't draw much power at all. It's super efficient, but it's also super small. Stuck my phone in there for reference. You know, phone's 6 inches or something. Fridge isn't much bigger, but you know, it gets it done. And I'm able to make cold drinks and put fish in there if I catch any, and overall it's been a great fridge. I've got a pretty standard sink setup, just a freshwater foot pump, saltwater hand pump, storage which I use for cups and water bottles, more storage for miscellaneous tools and chemicals and that kind of thing. And then over here I've got my countertop which I stick my little stove on. This thing works at anchor, but when I'm sailing it's a little bit too sketchy for my liking, and I just end up using the jet boil most of the time. I've got 3 beds on the inside of my sailboat. Since I'm at anchor now, what used to be my sea berth is now pretty much just storage for surfboards and fishing gear, fins, hats, and that kind of thing. Those of you who watched the passage video probably know that this bed got completely soaked on the passage because this hatch isn't actually watertight. That's something I still need to work on. So basically I just slept down here on the cockpit floor. This chair wins a participation prize as bed because I slept here pretty much the entire trip down from Hawaii. Very wet, very uncomfortable, but it kept me awake and energized, so I liked it. There's another berth slash bed back here, but as you can see it's taken up as storage for, I have sails back there, tools, hand pump desalinator, spare parts, nuts, bolts, hardware, that kind of thing, socket set, and fruit basket. Now I sleep up here in the V berth since I'm at anchor, not sailing anymore. It's very big for both the size and super cozy. When it's nice outside, I sleep on this cushion. Shout out to my mom for making it. Navigation was pretty simple on the passage because it was an entirely upwind trip and there was nothing in the way, so I just set the wind vane pretty much and went. But of course I had my backups and my navigation tools, and I'll show you that right now. Each day I would get my GPS position from one of my many sources and then write it down in this journal here, the precise location. I didn't always put it on the chart just because I was lazy, but if all my electronic charts were to go out, then I would have had no problem just plotting on this chart and finding my way that way. I use the GPS position from the AIS most frequently just because it's the most accurate, but the radio also has its own GPS signal. I have a backup antenna for this, and my B&G chart plotter also has a separate GPS antenna. On my sail down to French Polynesia from Hawaii, I departed from my previous home of Oahu, and I headed straight south until I cleared the Big Island. Then I headed as far southeast as I possibly could until I hit the doldrums around here. Doldrums are where you get no wind because there's 2 converging wind zones. And after that, I went straight down until I reached the Tuamotu Islands around here, where I bared off and went to my destination of Papeete, Tahiti. If you're wondering if I have to sail my boat back to Hawaii this year, the answer is no. I'll be keeping the boat in French Polynesia until cyclone season's over. And then next year I'll be heading way west through Tonga and then to Fiji, where I'll spend most of next sailing season. And then after Fiji, I'll be sailing south to New Zealand, where I'll spend the next storm season. I don't have an electric water maker because they're way out of my budget, so I just store all of my water in internal tanks and external jugs. I've got two 10-gallon water tanks. One's under that berth, one is under that berth. I've got the fuel tank down here, which is around 23 gallons or so total. It's a fiberglass tank with stainless steel inside of it. I added this access port because when I bought the boat, it had really contaminated diesel in it, which clogged up the filters and made this big sludge in the tank, which was disgusting. But I cleaned it up and I no longer have any problems with it. My water jugs go on the port side and the diesel jugs on the starboard side. I carry 15 gallons in the diesel tanks, and with all of my diesel combined, I can motor for about 350 miles. I can't always use the sails. This is my Yanmar 2YM15 diesel inboard engine. It's got about 620 hours on it. It came with the boat, and it wasn't installed until 2018, even though it's a 2013 engine. I can usually motor at around 4.5 knots in calm water, or 4 knots if there are a little bit of waves. Overall, it's been great. The only problems I've had with it were the gross fuel tanks, which came with the boat, and that's not even really a engine problem. The exhaust elbow went out, so I changed that, and a few other minor things, but it's been amazing so far. When it comes to safety equipment, I don't have a life raft because they were about $4,500 for the good ones, which I couldn't afford. In the case of emergency, I would supposedly grab my grab bag and jump on a surfboard and alert the emergency services, but you know, if it were rough, that probably wouldn't have worked. This is the grab bag. Inside the grab bag, I've got 3 things of hand flares, 3 things of flare gun flares, reflective mirror, flare gun, 2 whistles, 2 air horns, 2 lights, and for the important stuff, I have the EPIRB, which alerts the emergency services if I were to get into trouble. And most important, in my opinion, is the harness and the harness tether, which stop me from falling off the boat, which would pretty much be certain death. This is what I had for communication and satellite. It also works as an emergency beacon as well. Basically, for those of you that are wondering what happened to my phone on the way down that made me lose communication, was my phone stopped working and I was an idiot and didn't download a redundancy app on my iPad. Completely my fault. I'll never do it again, obviously, but that's why I wasn't able to talk to anyone or get weather. It's not exactly safety equipment, but I'll also mention my foul weather gear. It would have been a total show if I didn't have foul weather gear, especially because I slept outside at night. It kept me warm when nothing else probably would have, and I'm very glad I had it. Because so far I've been sailing alone, I'd say the most important gear I have on the boat, besides the sails, is the self-steering equipment. This contraption back here is called the wind vane. It steers the boat 90% of the time, just using wind, doesn't need electronics at all. That little paddle points into the wind, and then when that paddle moves off course, it moves a rudder in the water, which then pulls the tiller and puts the boat back on course. This is totally critical for sleep on solo passages, and it's the only reason I was able to sleep. Even then, I only probably slept about 3 hours average per night in 20-minute chunks, if even that. I also have an electric autopilot, which I use in light sailing conditions or when I'm motoring. My boat runs on battery power, so I have to be pretty mindful about my power consumption. I have 3 ways to charge the batteries. This is my Honda 1000 watt generator. It's a great machine. I run it on cloudy days, and it puts out 25 amps with my charger. This, of course, is the engine. I can put out quite a bit of power using the alternator, but I don't run it at anchor because it's bad for engines to run without a load. And then, of course, I've got my solar panels. There's one in the top deck that stays there when I'm sailing even, and then I have one that goes in the cockpit when I'm at anchor and don't have to worry about it blowing off. The batteries and chargers are back there in the stern locker. These are my 2 90 amp hour house batteries. House batteries basically power everything in the boat except for the engine starter. There is my solar charge controller, which receives and controls the current from the solar panels. And here's my start battery, along with my shore power charge controller. And here's the breaker panel. Don't have too many options, but it gets it done. Here's my voltage meter. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the electronics I have in the boat. To me, the most important of the electronics is this little device here called the AIS. The AIS sends out my position to other boats, and it also gives me the position of other boats who are also transmitting AIS. It saved me from a very close call on the way down from Hawaii. This is my radio. It's an ICOM with GPS. I have a spare radio, and I also have spare GPS for this radio. I don't have a working depth sounder. It broke right before I left Hawaii. There's also this little B&G chart plotter. I don't have charts for French Polynesia or a wind indicator that's not broken, so it doesn't have much use, but I just use it to look at the boat speed and course over ground. I use this to control the autopilot. This is the cockpit. It's where I spend the majority of my time when I'm sailing. I've got really easy access to all the winches, sheets, and the tiller because it's so compact. Just a brief walk through the cockpit. I've got bags for all of my lines. You can see the pad eye on the floor for my harness, engine starter panel, throttle control, bags for the winch handle and lines, and then my tiller. As you can see, I don't have a Dodge or a Bimini, but I'd like to add them in the future. A good amount of my mainsail lines run back to the cockpit, but I do have to go to the front of the sail to reef and then pull it down to a cleat where I tie it off. I'm usually able to sail at around 4 knots upwind. Downwind I can do closer to 6, and on a beam around the same 6, but I'll surf and go faster, sometimes even up to 8 knots. My mainsail is in great condition. It came with the boat. It's got 3 reefing points and a stack pack, so it's really easy to pack away. I bought a new jib around 110% for the passage. My old head sail was too worn down for me to feel comfortable taking it on passage, so that's why I bought a new one. And now for some honorable mentions. This is the anchor that's holding me to the bottom right now. It's a 26-pound aluminum spade anchor. It's never drug on me, and I'm very happy with it. I've got an electric windlass to let down and pull up the chain, but most of the time I just do it by hand anyways because I'm low on battery. I don't have a ton of fishing experience, but this is the equipment I have. I have a Pen 60 reel, all these lures, and this hand line. I use the hand line to catch the fish I did in my passage. Makes it really easy. Just put it around a winch and pull it in. If anyone knows a lot about fishing, let me know which one of these lures is best. I got quite a few comments about this book, so I figured I should mention it's kind of what inspired me to start this whole journey in the first place. This is my old and faithful Honda 2 horsepower, 4-stroke engine. It served me well, very light, very small. Today's the day I'm going to be selling this engine to another guy at the anchorage, so time to say goodbye. I didn't have Starlink on the passage, and I didn't necessarily want to get it because it's a relatively high expense, but I got it so I'm able to upload these videos. And the last honorable mention is all of you. I got an absolutely mind-boggling amount of positive feedback on the passage videos I put out, so I just want to say thank you for that. For that reason, I've decided I am going to try to put these videos out on as regular of a basis as I can. If you made it this far, thanks for watching this video. It's been filmed, edited, and posted nearly in real time. Today is September 28th. I filmed it and edited it over the last 2 days. I plan to keep the videos in as real of time as I practically can. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.